Good evening and welcome to the July 10, 2023 Mayor and Council Work Session. Tonight we have one discussion topic, which is an update, review of the status of the Great Seneca Highway Pedestrian Bridge. And I will note that Councilmember Wu will be participating remotely. And I will turn it over to Brian Fields and Tony Berger from our Public Works Department to lead us through the presentation.
Thank you and good evening. Tonight's item is a follow-up to our recent discussions regarding the Great Seneca Highway Pedestrian Bridge, including a presentation of the 30% design back in November of 2022. At that time, our direction was to explore options to invest in alternative transportation safety improvements at the bridge intersection as well as other locations throughout the city. The preliminary results of that study were presented to the Mayor and City Council at a March 2023 work session. In the meantime, our bridge design consultant has been working on the design and it has recently submitted the 75% design package to the staff for review. So just a quick overview. Here's kind of the overall map of the bridge project. Of course, you have Great Seneca Highway, Kentlands Boulevard. The bridge has a long gradual ramp on the Kentlands Boulevard side in the right-of-way. It has about a 200-foot span across Great Seneca Highway. And then on the north side, there's a meandering path down to the sidewalk on Orchard Ridge Drive. So for the 75%, there were not a lot of major changes. It basically took the design that you saw at concept at 30 and brought it to the design detail level of 75%. Good view of it is at the bottom here on this elevation, where on the left side you see the long ramp along Kentlands Boulevard. There's a stairwell at the base of the bridge. Then you have the 200-foot span across the highway, and then the meandering path on the other side down to Great and Orchard Ridge Drive. So a cost update at 75%. Our total construction cost is $5.9 million. That consists of a $5 million base construction. There's a $150,000 inflation adjustment, and there's just over $750,000 in construction engineering and inspection, CEI is what that's called. The city must hire an independent engineering consultant. This is not the design firm. It's a separate firm to oversee construction for this type of project. It's not something we do on most of our projects, but it's required here for two reasons. First would be the specialized nature and complexity of this type of bridge project, and second would be the location, as it's spanning a state highway. It's a highway that needs to remain open for traffic throughout the construction period. So that engineering firm would do construction testing as well as daily on-site full-time inspection of the construction. So again, a smaller project like the Casey Community Center Ped Bridge, we handled all of those tasks using in-house staff, but that's not the case here with this bridge. So the construction cost is based on the concept that was presented at 30%, includes a 10-foot wide path across the deck, the bridge deck, stainless steel screening, cantilever lighting look very nice, has an 8% contingency. So that current estimated $5.9 million is $1.6 million over the currently budgeted $4.3 million we have for construction. So we looked at how could the construction cost possibly be reduced. The main item that would be significant would be several aesthetic items, including the fencing and the lighting. Those could be reduced to more minimal efforts. However, we feel like those would have an adverse impact on the bridge aesthetics and they would not be desired by the community, therefore they're not recommended. So pivoting a little bit back to our March workshop. So we looked at the alternatives. I'm just going to give a brief recap of those today for context here. We looked at 8 intersections in detail. We studied those. We developed cost estimates for some basic pedestrian safety improvements. These 8 intersections are shown here. It includes the bridge intersection, number 1, as well as the other major intersection near AstraZeneca, which is the Quince Orchard Road, Great Seneca Highway, number 2. Had 6 others at various locations. And let me catch up here. So those 8 intersections were evaluated from an overall list of 30 that you see on the screen here. Text may be too small to read, but we compiled this list using Montgomery County crash data and prioritized them or ranked them essentially based on crash history and the types of crashes to what we felt were the intersections most in need of pedestrian safety improvements. This is without regard to whether it's city, county, or state roadway. It's just the need for an intersection in the city to be improved. So we selected 8 from this list. We specifically excluded the Maryland 355 intersections. That's because the county's bus rapid transit project is likely to reconfigure or rebuild many of those intersections as part of that project. So this slide is a repeat from the last one, which summarizes the costs of the improvements. We had 8 intersections at a total of $1.17 million for an average of $146,500 per intersection. Obviously, it varies quite a bit per location depending on what activities are performed, but just as a general, the $146,500 per intersection is what we came up with. So some considerations for implementing the intersection improvements in place of or perhaps ahead of the Great Seneca Pedestrian Bridge. Those are shown here. One is it spreads that funding to across the city more to reach locations where pedestrian improvements are most needed. They're smaller improvements, so they're easier to implement. They can be done incrementally or as part of a phased process at each site. It does include the 2 major intersections, as I mentioned, at AstraZeneca, so they would see some benefit in their immediate area as well. And then, obviously, it eliminates the cost burden of the PED bridge itself, both in terms of that delta I mentioned in the initial construction costs, but perhaps more importantly, those long-term maintenance costs that we covered in our last workshop. So, based on recent discussions with AstraZeneca, the following is a framework for a potential agreement for use of the bridge funding if it was determined to not move forward with the bridge at this time. And so AstraZeneca has paid into the city $2.7 million to date. $2 million would be allocated in what's called an AstraZeneca Safety Improvement Fund for the city, and $2 million would be allocated for intersection pedestrian improvements at those high priority intersections that we just discussed. About $250,000 would be used for design consultant fees for the bridge work that's complete to date, and then the remaining about $450,000 would be refunded to AstraZeneca. So at this time, staff is seeking direction from the mayor and city council on the future of the bridge project. This concludes our brief presentation, and we'd be glad to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Brief, but very to the point. Appreciate that. So this is one of those complicated matters because for a long time we've proceeded as if the best and most desired solution would be most desired project, I should say, would be this pedestrian bridge at Great Seneca Highway, and it was precipitated by, as you guys know, a couple of terrible accidents that happened years ago with then MedImmune employees. Now it's AstraZeneca. I think as we look at it and the costs continue to balloon, both the short-term and the long-term costs of this project continue to balloon, and we over the last couple of years have made efforts to apply an equity lens to the projects that we move forward on, and we see that we have these 8 intersections that we could make substantial, meaningful improvements at all 8 with less than the money, with a lot less than the money it would take to construct this bridge, much less to maintain it over its useful life. It seems like the right decision is to do the most good. You know, again, we have a tradition of being fiscally responsible, and we are working on being more equitable in our in our thinking, and so it would seem there's a really good argument to be made to switch directions here and focus on where these problem intersections have been demonstrated in the city, all over the city, not just in the western part. So, who wants to go next? Lisa, we'll go Lisa, then Neil.
Just a question about the money from AstraZeneca and the return of or the ability to retain it. Is it a fact that we will retain that money or a possibility?
Tanisha, you want to?
Yeah, I can answer
Okay.
that. We have had some preliminary discussions with AstraZeneca, so we could not have proposed this as the potential framework to renegotiate our agreement. They are open and amenable to this that was presented this evening. It would require us to return about $450,000 that's already been sent to us. And that's because their payout schedule was just a schedule. It wasn't necessarily based on expenses that we were incurring, and so that's why we've received $2.7 million to
Okay.
date. So we would need to return about $450,000, but the rest would remain, and they are very open to this.
Okay,
idea.
okay, great. All right, thank you.
Neil.
So just to add another question on top of that one. So of the money that was received, only the design consulting fees have been paid out so far? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that money, almost $2 million is sitting in the bank, ready to be allocated once we get approval, right?
Correct. We would need to, again, we have a couple of agreements, as Lynn likes to make sure we remember. We have a couple of agreements that would need to be renegotiated, but yes.
Including an annexation agreement?
Correct. There's an annexation agreement, and then also an escrow agreement.
Okay, so how much work is involved in modifying those agreements?
Well, I mean, assuming that we can come to agreement pretty quickly with MedImmune, it's not a lot of work. It would have to come back, obviously, to the mayor and council for approval as an amendment to the annexation agreement.
Okay. And is State Highway on board with the improvements that need to be made to their parts of this project?
We haven't approached State Highway with most of these. Several intersections, we've submitted our report and recommendations, but we haven't gotten to asking for approval or permit stage yet.
So, again, on continuing that discussion, if we want, say, looking at the first intersection in Kentlands Boulevard and Great Seneca, the proposal is to add a fourth crosswalk across Great Seneca Highway. Who would pay for that? Would that come out of the money that we have?
That would be our intent, these improvements would be funded with that $2 million.
Okay, but so I had asked a question of the consultants when they came in. There's a right turn on red at that intersection from Kentlands Boulevard onto Great Seneca Highway. There is a lane that is set aside that I often wish cars would remember to use when they're in front of me. That lets you merge more easily onto Great Seneca Highway. It's something, there's nothing contemplated in this program to deal with that, but what we don't want is for pedestrians to be thinking that a crosswalk is safe and cars thinking that it's okay to make a right turn on red. So we're going to have to deal with issues like that, and hopefully we're looking at the details before we talk to State Highway about how to implement this.
We can certainly do that. I think this is high-level concept of the types of improvements. We would need to study it, hire a design consultant to examine those exact types of issues.
Okay, so what that implies is that we're really not sure how much money it's going to take to do this. We just have a ballpark.
These are high-level estimates
Right.
per intersection.
Okay.
But included in the estimate would be the design consultant too, right? You guys were considering we would have to take that step, right?
For these exhibits, the 1.17 is just construction. So we would have to do a design for most of these. Some of these are not really design related, but some will and will require a permit from SHA.
As an example that Neil gave, that would be a signal modification that would have to be coordinated through SHA. They would typically look to us to provide the plans and the engineering associated with that if we were the requester.
Okay, and just as a final point, just from my point of view, I thought about this long and hard because I've been kind of counting on this bridge project for many years to make it safer, because I'm living in Kentlands, I'm very familiar with this intersection. But basically, I've come around to the point of view, as Spock has said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. If we can make this intersection safer and do the same for many other intersections around the city, I think it's the right call, especially given the economics, but really less about the economics and much more about making sure we're keeping people safer. So I've been reluctantly dragged to this position, but I'm comfortable with changing direction on this program.
Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. The one thing that's not here with intersection 1 is, I think we talked about it at the last work session, is trying to get a left turn going north on Great Seneca coming out of the Kentlands. I was there a few weeks ago, and there was somebody that got stuck at the pedestrian refuge in the middle after the light had been green for a while, and I was going to make the turn, and I saw her out of the corner of my eye at the last minute, and I stopped and I let her go. And that was just one more reminder, like, even if we have like an extended red or whatever and pedestrians are going to start, it's that just the angle of that, the way those streets come together, it is very difficult to see pedestrians there. So I think it's going to be really important if we do move forward with this. And I had come around to begrudgingly support the bridge, but now with the changes, I'm fine going back and spreading out the funding across the city, because we do have a lot of needs. But I do think it's going to be important that we approach State Highway about that, even just from a visibility standpoint, to make sure that there's opportunity for the cars to clear, whether it's a lagging left or however we need to do it, to make sure that people aren't just not seeing folks out of that corner of their eye. I think that's really going to be important, in addition to what Neil's talking about on the other side of that intersection. There was actually a fender bender at the Saybrook one this afternoon. It looked like it was one of the driving schools. Might have had something happen. So as I was driving by, I kind of smirked, knowing what we were discussing this evening. So I'm with my colleagues. I think it makes sense. It will be interesting to see as Kentlands can, if the infill projects ever happen, looking at these intersections again as part of that process, because obviously that would significantly increase the population over there, and the desire to go over to the park across the street. So keeping that in mind.
Okay, I got a question by text from Councilmember Wu, and this is for you, Tanisha. What is AstraZeneca's position on these pedestrian safety improvements versus the bridge?
AstraZeneca was supportive, which is why they're open to the renegotiation.
Okay. And Councilmember Wu, if you, I can see that you're on Zoom. If you want to speak up at any point, just use the Zoom raise hand button, and I'll call on you.
So let me just add that I saw two people from Kentlands this morning as I was driving by, crossing that intersection. Cars were stopping for them, and I watched as they made their way up the hill to AstraZeneca. So I guess people living in Kentlands are commuting by foot into AstraZeneca today. So, and neither of them got run over. Thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen people crossing that street. So this time I'd like to open it up to anybody who'd like to testify on this. And staff's looking at me kind of funny because there's nobody from the public in the room, but there are a couple on Zoom. If anybody on Zoom would like to testify on this, use the Zoom raised hand button and I'll call on you. Going once, Going twice? Okay.
Can I say one other thing?
You can say, we're early, you can say whatever you want.
All right, well, I have 22 minutes of remarks ready. So it's good that we've got some money to put into pedestrian safety around the city, and it's necessary. It appears that we've basically taken a number of intersections based on the funding available. I would urge staff to look at, if there are other intersections that go beyond the budget that we've gotten from AstraZeneca, I would like to consider going beyond the framework that we've laid out. And if we need to allocate some city funds, sorry, Tanisha, I know you don't like me out spending your money willy-nilly.
It's not my money, it's
Okay.
our money.
Right. You're the primary guardian, that's all I meant. But at any rate, I think we should look at this and make sure that we're covering the needs of the pedestrians throughout the city, even if we have to spend a little more to get there. That's my input.
Okay,
That wasn't 22 minutes, was it?
not quite.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, please.
Ditto.
Okay. Lisa, anything?
You may want to relax that for a second.
Okay,
I
take
have
your time,
another
take your
question.
time.
On, for Old Town Avenue and South Summit, what's the correction there?
So that intersection, we actually have done a separate study that showed it warranted signalization. That's not included in this line item here.
Okay.
This line item is crosswalk improvements, sight lines is only $50,000. We think that will need to be a separate city CIP project based on our safety study. So that would be in line with our other signal improvements outside of this project here.
Okay, thanks.
All right, unless anybody has anything else.
The sooner we can get that project done, the better.
Okay. And I got a text from Councilmember Wu dittoing again what Neil said, so.
A double ditto, that's a first.
A double ditto. So with that, thank you, gentlemen. I'm assuming you feel guided here.
I believe we do.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Then that is our one discussion topic for the evening. Our next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be next Monday, July 17th, 7:30 p.m. You can participate in person or over Zoom, just like tonight. And I will put in one plug for the city Sports Fest, which is coming up on Saturday morning. Unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town and have to miss it, but I went last year and it's a lot of fun. Bring the kids out. It's a great time. So until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.